And if you have any information I haven't been able to make use of tonight, can you email me, go on the website of Tewkesbury Historical Society and email me. We want to learn as much as possible about the people who were involved in this terrible war. Even if they weren't prisoner of war, it was a hard slog for the 14th Army. So good to see you. So tonight we're trying to put it in context, what happened in those terrible years in the war. So we did have our own slave labourers. Charles Hemming, we'll be talking about him. He's got relations here tonight. And Sarah, you're here. And you informed me 20 years about it. I learnt so much. Bombardier Key, his daughter is sitting in the front here, Barbara. And a new person I met, the daughter of Sapper F.J. Jane, who actually was a slave labourer but came back, thank God, and she's been so helpful, as you'll find out with the information later. And that is Charles Hemming, our former Mayor Ken Powell. He was related to him. That's me, but that's not important tonight. Yeah, you can go on holiday to these places, but Saga, they steer you away from anything which is worrying, because they like to be all the good news they like to tell us, but they take you to the places, which is good. And another thing that interests me as a teacher, how on earth do we learn about what happened in this? We read books, but films are wonderful, aren't they? A way of learning history, but be careful. The Bridge on the River Kwai was the first film I saw, aged 10. My brother thought I was old enough to go and see a war film. I've never forgotten it. But you've got to be very, very careful, because I shall explain later. It was it was written by a Vichy Frenchman for a start. Then the Americans and the British fought over turning it into a film. And as you know, the Americans got more money, so they influenced it. And you'll see the star there is the American William Holden. The real star next door to him was Kenel Toosey, who was the wonderful actor McGuinness, was it? And there's others in the background. And the silly question, isn't it? Did the bridge on the River Kwai really exist? Well, you'll see. I try to show you it's not as simple as it ought to be. And you all know, don't you, when you go home, you have a bottle of white wine, you call it plonk, don't you? And that's because the British soldiers in the First World War, their French wasn't very good, Van Blanc, plonk. And that was the same with the River Kwai, as I shall explain. Right, now, I have to explain I am not anti-Japanese in any way, especially 23 years ago, when this wonderful Japanese girl blessed our family by marrying my son. And then, of course, they produced my grandson, Louis. Now, she is wonderful. She's very well educated. She's got degrees. She knows nothing whatsoever about what the Japanese did in World War II, because it was not part of their curriculum. All she said to me was, well, we were on the same side, weren't we? Well, she was right in one way, because the First World War, we were allies. But she knows nothing about the Second World War. And my son won't let me bring it up with it. Actually tell her what her grandparents probably did. I mean, whether Louis will ever learn, I don't know, but there we go. But she is absolutely lovely, and as you'll see, I've been to Japan. And there he is, growing up. Well, I'm not sure about that uniform. It looks a bit like Burma to me, but I'm not very keen. Now, this man is wonderful. Sadly, he's now passed on. At a great age, 98. And he was a Japanese prisoner of war who survived, came back, and he dedicated his life to getting a fair deal for the prisoners of war, which I shall talk about in a little while. They didn't get a fair deal at all, you won't be surprised. And there he is, he's fighting. Right, there's been two agreements with first of all, after the war, former peer does were given 76 quid. What is that today? Well, 1,780. Not very much, was it? And then I think it was Tony Blair, he did another negotiation. In the year 2000, families got £10,000, and that's worth 22,700 today. Did anybody get that £20,000? No. You can remember, do you? Who said no? Right, okay. You better chase that with the sisters then. But yeah, yeah, it was nowhere near what they should have been paid, but I suppose it was something. Okay, now you've got to be careful about the past is subjective. It depends who you are. I was very keen when I went after the wedding of my son and daughter-in-law. I went to Japan. That was in 2004. And I was desperate to see the museums of World War II. Oh, it's not World War II, it's the Great East Asian War, is how the Japanese referred to it. And of course, you go into the museum in Tokyo, the first thing you see, the pride and joy of the Japanese, is that railway engine. Now, we all like railway engines, but not this one, because this was used on the Death Railway built by our relatives who were slave labourers. So they're very proud of it. And you go around that museum and you think, hang on a minute, this is not the history I taught. Their history is different. That's the way it is. So these are the local war deaths which we commemorated today. And we're also going to do it at 11 o'clock at the town hall on Sunday. So if you can come to that, to a 2-minute silence. So the prisoners were Frederick Key. They were Cecil Ryland and Mike Peen Price. He didn't know this. When his name was read out this morning, he said, he's my cousin. And you learn these things all the time. Okay. And Charles Hemming, we've mentioned Ken Powell's relative, Sarah Andrews' relative here. And yeah, there he is. And I feature him in this story quite a lot. Also Cecil Ryland as well. And Frederick Key. They're important parts of this talk. Right, a bit of boring history for you. I'm sure you all know the history, but you've heard of Pearl Harbor. Look, notice the spelling because it's American. 7th of December 1941, the day of infamy, which shocked the whole world. And in some ways, it was a good thing because the Americans then came into the war. So very, very important. Now, what we're interested in is Singapore, which was the biggest base in Asia, which was a British base, and it should have been very well protected. But the snag was the protection was all going out to sea because they anticipated the Japanese would attack by sea. They didn't. They came by land on bicycles. And of course, the most disastrous day in the history of the British Army, according to Winston Churchill. Then we move up to Siam, or Thailand, we call it. Now it's Siam, isn't it? And that's where it is. And that's Burma, which today has got this dreadful name of Myanmar because they're having a terrible time there. And the big aim of the Japanese, of course, was to capture India, which was the jewel in the crown, as you already know, and it was the basis of our empire. So what they wanted to do was capture India. That's what their big aim was, as well as Australia as well, down the bottom there, but India was the big one. And you won't have heard about this battle, because we don't celebrate it, but actually the Japanese Navy were defeated off Ceylon in the Battle of Trincomalee. Look it up when you get home. And we did frighten the Japanese to death about attacking by sea. I heard on the news today it was the American Battle of Midway that scared the Japanese, but you'll have to look it up. So but the important thing was, to capture India, the Japanese would have to go by land. And that's where we should be talking about the Burma Death Railway in a bit of detail. Again, you go with Saga, it's lovely. They do look after you well, and they're such nice people, the Thai people, but they give you the wrong impression about the war. What they do, they all take you to this wonderful railway station, which was the Royal Railway Station. The Thai people are very keen on their royal family, even more so than we are. So you're taken to that wonderful station, the Royal Station, and everybody oohs and ahs about that. I wasn't interested in that because I knew and the railway line, just the other side of the station, that is where the British prisoners of war came from Singapore and then up to those mountains there, which is where the death railway was built in Burma. And the conditions bad. It was in the mountainous area. The weather was awful with the monsoons, etc., as well as the treatment of the Japanese. So that's where they were going to. And there is a map there, which I shall then refer to a little bit later in the talk. Right, what was rail travel like in 1942-43? We don't know, because nobody was allowed to take photographs. That was a capital offence for the Japanese. But we did have an artist who was he was captured by the Japanese, imprisoned in Changi. He was then sent up to the death railway, and he took the life into his hands and drew dramatic pictures of what it was like to be on that train. And think about it, in the day, we know now because we're suffering in the daytime it was like an oven, and night time it was an icebox. So, and it was all very crowded as well. And so Saga doesn't talk about that, of course. Right, a few facts then about people who were killed building the Thai-Burma Railway. Obviously, we're interested in the prisoners of war, and we lost over 12,000 prisoners of war. Some Australians, of course, and the Dutch have a really good reputation with the prisoners of war because they were good at making medical equipment from nothing because of their ingenuity. So that's 12,000 dead, so that's 12%. Now, look at the Asian labourers. 86% of the deaths, Asian labourers. We don't know where they're buried. Are they buried? Are they on a website? They're not, because sadly, they were Asian labourers who were recruited from all parts of the former empires of the French and the Dutch and the English. And so a huge number died, but we don't know who they are, which is wrong, really. The Japanese and the Koreans there, you'll see only 1%. The Japanese were the engineers, and the Koreans, they were the bad guys because they ran the prison camps. Now, Korea was attacked by Japan in 1910. They've been brutalized by the Japanese most of the 20th century, and so these are the ones who treated the prisoner of war so badly. So there are a few boring statistics for you. But that figure makes you think. So, if you go with Saga, you have to go for a ride on the Death Railway because it's still there. It stops at the Burmese border now, but you can go from Bangkok once a day up to the Burmese border and come back. And of course, everybody wants to do that because it's the sort of thing you do on Saga. And there's me, I'm afraid, 20 years ago. And it's a very bumpy ride, and we didn't stay long on it, and I'll explain why. But you have to, as a tourist, you have to do these things, don't you? And of course, if you're with Saga, you have to have a good lunch. And so we did have a lunch on the railway, and you can see there's a bit of rails there which were relayed by these suffering prisoners of war. The food was good. And just nearby, you see some pretty badly written English. It was the Wangpo Railway Station, Kanchanaburi, and it talks about, in 1943, people said one of wood, that means a sleeper, one wooden sleeper is the same as one man. So what they do is they count the number of sleepers and they recognise that is the number of prisoners of war who were killed. Not the Asians, just the prisoners of war. And why do we all go on this route? We have to see this engineering marvel, the Wampong viaduct, which the Japanese are very proud of. And you'll see most of the people leaning out the window are Japanese. That's what it actually looked like in the war. Again, there's very few photographs of the railway in the war. Those all built by hand and very rudimentary tools of the work, and very poor conditions in the weather. And also the Japanese were desperate to get this railway built so they could attack India by land. They never did, you'll be pleased to know. And ironically, the biggest use of the railway after this was to get the Japanese to escape from the British 14th Army, who were chasing them out of Burma. So there's a bit of irony for you there. Of course, you go there. I'm sorry about this. I love steam railway engines, and so we all go and look at the railway, which are there for us. And I'm afraid there is me up in a railway engine, obviously enjoying it. Shouldn't be doing that, really. And so, of course, the tourists all want to go to one place, the River Kwai Bridge. Okay? And there is the picture of the bridge over the River Kwai. Now, anybody who's seen the film will say there's something wrong here. Just wait, I'll explain that later. But that is actually, I've walked over that bridge. It's the only time we found people who were bad-mannered, the Thais. They were pushing and shoving because there were too many doing it. But that's what it looks like today. And it's Kwai Sai Yok is the name of the river. So, of course, the British soldiers simplified it to the River Kwai, and which it is today. Kwai Sai Yok means the big River Kwai, and there's another name for the smaller River Kwai as well. So that's where we get the name River Kwai from, a corruption by the soldiers. So let's look at more corruption now, the bridge on the River Kwai. So it should be called the bridge on the Kwai Sai Yok. You wouldn't get you going to see that, would you? And there is a picture of the bridge being blown up. Now, I shall show you a better picture in a minute. It was blown up. And there it is. Now, that was not blown up by Colonel Toosey and the British, because in the film, they blew up the bridge themselves. It didn't happen in reality. It had to happen after in about 1944-45, the Americans and the British started to bomb the bridge. And as you see there, eventually the British, actually not the Americans, managed to hit it and damage it. And they used one of the first guided bombs, which we now use as cruise missiles, aren't they? A very early version of it. And I did have contact from one of our members, Joe Gabbett. His wife is the descendant of somebody who worked on the delivery of those bombs, and he's got the name of Ercol, and he made the Ercol furniture, which we all probably like in our homes. So that's what really happened. And there you see, they managed to destroy the bridge temporarily. The Japanese repaired it very quickly. That's in 30th February 1945, and it's RAF bomb damage, that is. Now, there were two bridges, actually. The first bridge was the one behind, the wooden bridge, which the prisoners had to build first of all, and once they got that up and working, they then built a proper iron and stone bridge. Okay. Now, why on earth in the film did they not use that wooden bridge to make it more realistic? They didn't, because it was American. So there again is what it should look like. And there is the famous bridge on the River Kwai, if you go and see the film. And of course, it's a typical Rocky Mountain bridge, isn't it? Which you see in cowboy films. And they're very popular. Again, if you go with sagas to North America, you'll see them. But it was an American film made by American money. And this was actually in Ceylon, where all the action took place. They couldn't do it in Thailand. So which bridge should it have been? There you go. And there it is, the Kwai Sai Yok. Who was the villain? Who was the hero? Right. Now he's our hero, Colonel Nicholson in the film. I'll explain what he was really called. And he was the guy who organised the discipline of the British soldiers. They actually built the bridge, and it was him, if you watch the film, who we didn't know if he did deliberately or he fell on the plunger, but they were the ones who destroyed the bridge for the first time. That's Colonel Nicholson, but he's only the second star, not William Holden. I'd like anybody to come back to me later and tell me what the Americans did on the River Kwai. And that's McGuinness, but in real life that's Lieutenant Colonel Toosey, and he was the guy who organised protected the British soldiers, prisoners of war, as best he could. Although he was locked in a hut which was subjected to the sun, because the rule was British officers do not work, and he fought for the right and suffered for it to make sure his officers did not work. And it's not very fair to our generation, but that's what it was like in the world wars. The officers didn't work. But he decided that the officers would act as the engineers, and they would direct the men, and they would do the work. And that's how it happened. Nice little cartoon done by a Dutchman. I do want to emphasise the Dutch were held in high regard by the prisoners, and there he is kicking the Japanese, but that's a bit propaganda, isn't it? Right, there is that the villain? Okay, there is the commandant of the camp. Now, if you watch the film, you will see he was a colonel, which was the rank he should have been, but he wasn't a colonel. He was a sergeant major, a low rank as that, and he was the man who negotiated with Toosey. And there's a nice story there, because he did feel guilty later the way he treated his prisoners of war. He was desperate to meet Toosey. Toosey refused to meet him and shake his hand. And it was only after Toosey died in 1984 that Sato actually went to his grave and made his peace with his maker there. So there's a good sort of positive story there about the Japanese. Right, there's the true hero. We don't hear about him because he's a Thai hero, Boon Pong. And why was he a hero? Because he was the man who smuggled what the prisoners need to get food and medicine. Now, the one thing that the prisoner of war never forgave the Japanese for, they stole all the Red Cross medicines. And of course, that caused the loss of so many men because they didn't get the proper treatment. And they needed money. Apparently, the thing they really valued was duck eggs. And he provided the money to buy the duck eggs for their nourishment. One thing the Americans didn't understand, once the war was over, they sent plane loads of provisions for the prisoner of war, and they dropped rice. And of course, the prisoner of war hated, oh, you're smiling, they hated rice because that's all they had as prisoners. So they didn't thank the Americans for that. Now, here's the real bad guy. Now, you've all heard of the Gestapo, haven't you? They're famous in the films. The Japanese had their own form. It was called the Contemptorii. And they was the political police who came into the camps and looking for people they thought were enemies of the state. And he was the man who was responsible for the treatment of this prisoner called Bill Drower. He was an officer, and he was put in this hut, and he was so badly treated that he almost died. He was rescued because the war ended on the 16th of August, and that's what he looked like when he was a normal soldier before he got badly treated by the Japanese. And the guy, that contemporary man, he was one Japanese officer who was actually executed after the war. Now, we didn't do very well at executing war criminals, Germans and to some extent the Japanese, because after the war, the Cold War had started. We're on the American side, and we're fighting the communists then. And some of the most anti-communist people in the world were the Japanese right wing and of course the German right wing as well. And so they were converted into being spies, etc. for Britain. So, but anyway, they executed that man, which was a good thing. So here's the railway. Started off just Kanchanaburi, which is near Bangkok. It then went to the Burma border. I think it's called Hellfire Pass there. People have probably been showed Hellfire Pass, and it's a terrible experience. And then it joined the main line at Thambuizat, which could have got the soldiers into India to get their desire to capture India. Never happened. And there's this rather sad cartoon, or very accurate cartoon, which showed really the fact that the railway was built by dead people, basically. It's very, very sad. Well, the railway was finished. The Japanese, they called it Speedo, and the last few months they were determined the British should build this railway as soon as possible. However, whatever the conditions were, whatever the brutality they issued, they had to have it finished. And there is a picture when the railway was opened in December 1943, I think, by the Japanese. And that's the only other photograph I've got of the railway in action. Notice there was an Asian labourer here. Don't know what happened to him. Probably just died and was buried by the sleepers. I just don't know. So that's very few pictures available. Whoops, sorry. Hello. That's going to cause us problems. No. Can't go back. All right, I went to Kanchanaburi to see, I wanted to see the grave of Cecil Ryland. Mike Keane Price's relatives, he's found out. And the one thing you'll notice about most of these British prisoners, they were quite mature men. He was nearly 40. They were all experienced soldiers. Some of them had been to Dunkirk and been rescued from there. And Pearl Harbor was such a shock. Some men were on the way in ships to South Africa to go and reinforce the 8th Army in Egypt. The lucky ones ended up in Egypt. It wasn't very nice, but it was a winning battle and they got medals. The unlucky ones were the ones who were diverted to Singapore. And this is, as it says, oh, hang on, that's me, sorry. And he travelled 20,000 miles simply to surrender. Okay, as soon as they got there, the British General Percival surrendered the army, and they were taken prisoners straight away by the million, or by the thousands anyway. And you have to bear in mind that it's against the Japanese beliefs, military beliefs, that you must never surrender. If you surrender, you lost your humanity, and that's why they were treated so badly. And so they didn't get a chance to fight. Now, another one of our soldiers, which is Barbara's father here, F.L. Key, he was born in 19... Again, he was a mature man, and he had joined the Royal Horse Artillery in the 20s. A lot of them joined the army because they wanted a wage. It was the Depression. There was no work in England. A lot of them joined the army just to get a decent living, and they ended up being prisoners of war in Burma, which is a bit of a waste. Now, he was never buried. He got that cross, which is fine. His body was cremated, lots of the work, because he died of disease, cholera. And after the war, the British prisoner of war, they stayed behind after the war ended find every burial or memento of any soldier who was killed, and they moved them to these big cemeteries. This one is Kanchanaburi in Thailand, which I watched. So that is, Barbara took that picture many years later when she was allowed to visit her father's grave in Burma. And if you know your history from that period, Burma went into I don't think it was communist, but it went into a closed country, and they would not let British people go and visit the graves until 1991, I think was the date. And he should have got that medal, the Burma Star. I think we've got to follow this up. Some civil servant has decided the prisoners of war were not fighting, so they didn't deserve the Burma Star, and so they didn't get it. Now you'll see, come and see Mike's medals of his father there, and he did get the Burma Star. He was in the 14th Army. He did get back eventually, and he got the medal. He also got an American medal, which he shouldn't have had, but Mike's keen on that. So, terrible. Now this is what they died, and I don't want to upset anyone. There's no photographs of people dying of cholera. But we know about cholera in Tewkesbury because we had 2 outbreaks in 1832 and 1849. And we lost 200 people here because they were drinking water out of the mill haven, and they were also using the mill haven to go to the toilet. That's how bad things were in 1849. Got much better after that. So you only get cholera if the water supply is neglected and it gets contaminated. And it's a terrible way of dying. So, and that's the... Now, see these signatures there, Ronald Searle? Some of you will know about Ronald Searle as a cartoonist for the Sunday Observer. And we're very grateful he risked his life for these. And there he is. There is Ronald Searle, a self-portrait of when he was a prisoner of war at Changi. By the way, the Japanese were shocked by the number of people that surrendered. They didn't know what to do with all these prisoners. They were crammed into Changi jail for a long, long time, sometimes made to build monuments to the dead Japanese soldiers in the Malaya. But eventually, this railway was the solution. They had all these soldiers, nothing to do. Let's get them up to Thailand and get them to work on this railway, which is what happened. And he's now written this wonderful book about his war drawings, which you can buy for yourself if you want to see it. So, and of course, that was against the Japanese rules to draw pictures. He would have been killed if he'd been caught. So, rest in peace. Well, this is the one in Burma, which nobody was allowed to visit until 1991. And Barbara was able to go with your mother to see her father's grave in 1991. Look, it's beautifully kept, done by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, and the Burmese at least let them do that, but they wouldn't let people go and visit the graves. I can't pronounce it very well because I don't know Burmese. So there we go. And if you're interested, yeah, go online. Some of these names you see now, they're online and you can learn. Now, Charles Hemming, I'll talk about in a minute. You can see there where he died, a hospital camp. We've got a grave number for him. But look what he died of, dysentery and beriberi. There were tropical diseases caused by lack of medicine. Who had the medicine? The Japanese had it. And we now know that, he was 31 when he died. His wife was Nora Hemming of Northampton. And we've got his daughter here and his granddaughter. And his granddaughter suddenly popped up in a class I was giving 20 years ago. You're talking about my grandfather. And you'll see in a minute, she brought in some wonderful mementos of that. So find that website. So here he is. This is Mr. Hemming, also Ken Powell's uncle or something like that. And they knew nothing about the fate of these prisoners. In 1943, March, April, the Japanese very kindly let them send out one of these psycho-styled postcards which said, I am well, I am ill, I am whatever. You know, and you just filled in the gaps. So they knew their relations were alive as prisoners, and that must have been a lot of relief to them, but of course they didn't know what condition these prisoners were in. So, and it was only when his friend Sidney Roper came back to England after the war, he survived, and he wrote this beautiful letter to Sarah's grandma. And I'm going to let you read this. I don't want to spoil it for you, so okay. It's a lovely letter. And of course he's writing it to make the widow feel better. It must be one of the most difficult jobs if you're an officer to do, was to write home and explain why one of your soldiers had died. And you have to do it in a way which doesn't upset the family. It's all very good history, this is. Much disease. They even went to hospital. That should have been good, shouldn't it? Not, because they hadn't got the medicine. Charles did not improve. He nursed him. Oh, that pipe is important. You'll learn that in a minute. All he could do was give an occasional light for his pipe. He died in his sleep, very peacefully during the night. His was the incurable form of the disease, okay? Yeah, his body had to be cremated. Everything was taken from him. Valuables, wallet, photographs. But his friend had his spoon with his regimental number and a leather-covered shaving mirror. It's very important to soldiers. He prized it. I kept it for you with one or two of your letters. And it ends like this. Lovely letter. I don't know who Sidney Roper was. If you do know, perhaps you'll put me in... Well, it won't be live, I suppose, but I'd like to know more. A really moving letter, that was. And there he is. That's what Sarah brought in for me the next day. There is the spoon with his regimental number on it. And if you watched Antiques Roadshow last Sunday about this war, there was somebody came in with a bowl made out of like some sort of wooden structure, and they made the point: if you had a bowl like this, you could eat. If you couldn't have a bowl, very difficult to eat. And so this spoon was very important to keep him alive, as it were. And there's the spoon again, and there's the shaving kit, which Sarah and the family have still got. And he's got all his medals, which is wonderful that you've got this to show. And they let me take a photograph, so thank you very much. Mike Keane Price, as I should explain, has brought his father's medals. Wonderful way of doing it. So, and yeah, there is a picture of him in the army. A company of soldiers, about 120 men. I managed to blow it up there, and we could see what he looked like when he was in the army. So, you know, he was getting on a bit in the 30s. And there's a lovely picture there of the soldier with his wife and his daughter and another. Is that you?
That's Nora and Charles. So Nora was his wife, and then it was Teresa, who's my grandmother, and my great aunt Sheila.
Yes, that's very important to you, isn't it? Yeah. That's all she's got. Right, the tardy postscript. Now, it was not until 1991 that relatives were able to visit the graves in Burma. Now, that is Mr. Hemming's wife, yeah, okay, and of course that is Barbara's mother. I should make the point that Barbara was born in 1939, and you didn't see your father, did you?
Oh yes, when I was born.
Sorry?
When I was born.
When you were born, that was it. Yeah.
But he'd gone, because he was on reserve, he went in September.
Yeah. I mean, that's terrible for the families, isn't it? So she managed to get there in 1991, took the ferry house, and she met Dr. Oh, blank. Dr. Shepherd was there. Yeah, the great Dr. Shepherd had only just died, and he was there because his brother had been killed actually fighting the Japanese in the 14th Army, and so he was there as well. So it must have been nice for Barbara to meet Dr. Shepherd there. Okay, so I was very disappointed on VE Day in Tewkesbury, and there I took a photograph at the crucial time. That's how many people were there. I noticed those two people there. I blew them up, and I've got to know them since. That's Mr. and Mrs. Dron, and they're both veterans of the Royal Navy. They're both here tonight, which is wonderful. And Penny's father was not only was he a slave labourer, but he survived. He came home, he had his daughters, and I shall talk about him in a minute. So we did a bit better this morning. If you look on Facebook, we had a few more people there today. I hope on Sunday you'll all come out for the 2 minutes at 10:50 at the Town Hall on Sundays. Please come. Now here he is. Here is, oh gosh, I got this wrong again. It's Jane, isn't it? I keep getting this wrong. I do apologise, because he's Cornish, and the Wheel Jade was a famous mining hall. Oh dear, I'm sorry about that. But there's a picture, some pictures of him now, supplied by Penny and her sister, who's been very helpful. So there he was when he first joined up, and he was an experienced soldier. He was actually in Palestine and Egypt in the 1930s, and then they moved him over, unfortunately for him, to Burma and to Singapore, of course, in 1942, and he was captured there. The good news was he did survive. He did come back after the war, and he did get married. And you see a nice picture of them getting married there, and that's Penny's parents. And that's a picture of him later in life. Again, when you come and see Mike's pictures later, you'll see how much weight his father had lost in Burma. Not because he was a prisoner, just because of the conditions in Burma. So that's what he like, just before he died. And he had a medical examination before he died, and this is what they wrote: a 50% disability due to dysentery, malnutrition, privation with associated gastric symptoms, helminthiasis, whatever that is, dengue fever I've heard of, because that's dangerous, nerve injury and noise-induced deafness. That was a 50% incapacity benefit he got, which is absolutely appalling, I hope you all think. He did have to get a job after the war, and eventually he was employed by the AA. Now, anybody of my age who went on a car in the 50s and 60s, if you were in the AA, and they were in motorbikes in those days, the AA came up to the car and saluted you, and it was a wonderful feeling. And that's what happened, and he was one of the men who saluted them. He was actually on Bodmin Moor, and it was pretty awful conditions in Bodmin Moor. There he was, 50% disabled, yet that was his job after the war. And he did. The other important thing about him, which I think is remarkable, despite what he'd been through, he did qualify to be a member of Mensa, M-E-N-S-A. You probably all know you've got to be pretty bright to get recognised by Mensa, and he got this award, which, after what he'd been through, was remarkable, I think. Right, the surrender of the Japanese was on that date, 2nd of September 45. Oh, look how long it took to get him home, to the 26th of March 1940, presumed because hopefully he had been put into medical care to recover from a lot of the things that were wrong with him. There's a nice little story there, because when I came to Tewkesbury School, my headmaster was Mr. Fall, and his wife was absolutely lovely. I got to know them well, and they met in Australia. She and he were nursing British prisoners of war who were on the way back from Australia, then back to England. And that's a nice little story there. All right, that's what he should have had. He didn't fight. He was a prisoner. Now, what is the job of a prisoner of war? According to the British, they must make an attempt to escape. Now, to escape from the Japanese is very difficult. He did make an attempt to escape in Singapore after he was captured. He was recaptured. Fortunately, he didn't suffer too, as far as I know, suffer too badly for it. So he did fight, yet they wouldn't give him that blooming medal which he deserved. I think we've got to follow this up now and start harassing the civil servants who make these decisions, and perhaps get posthumous awards for the family. Right, some POWs actually did survive. Right, now that one, top left there, from Twinning, he's very interesting. His name was Cole, and his son became a policeman and a detective, and it was he who arrested Geoffrey Prime, who was the spy who caused Mrs. Thatcher to ban trade unions at GCHQ. He had him arrested. And then he became a writer himself. He wrote a very good, yeah, you know that good, he wrote the very good biography of John Moore, and we invited him to speak to us. And in the 30 years I've been organising speakers, he's the only one who couldn't make it because he died suddenly, which was a great shame. But his book is wonderful. I do hear that his mother, his wife, does have a diary pertaining to his experiences in prison war. I haven't been able to make contact with it. Anybody can help who lives in Twinning, please? I suppose his wife is no longer with us, I don't know. The one in the bottom there, I have heard Sigler Wilkins, somebody here did know of him when he came back as a skeletal figure. He was in a terrible state. And he was captured in Hong Kong on Christmas Day in 1941. He was imprisoned and he got out. The next one, I don't know too well there, Mr. Smith. Now when I give this talk in Gloucester over the recent years, they remember him, Sergeant Birch. He actually went into the Gloucestershire Constabulary, and he was a very famous policeman whom people remembered well. And of course, let's give credit again to Sid Taverner, who spent a lot of his retirement trying to get compensation for the prisoners of war. Now, I'm being a bit annoyed the last 2 weeks because the BBC News has been focusing exclusively on Hiroshima and the dropping the 2 bombs at Nagasaki. Now, I do agree that they obviously suffered terribly, and it's something we don't want to happen again. But I was annoyed with the BBC because they never explained why the bomb had to be dropped. And I think most people who were alive at the time, and certainly me today, we believe that it had not been for the atomic bomb, the Japanese emperor would not have called the war off for a long time. And we'd have lost a lot more soldiers when the war carrying on. Now, you probably know Fred Remmer, who was the postmaster in Fort Hampton. In 1945, Fred was on a ship going out to fight the Japanese after Hiroshima. And he was sent back to England, and as we know, he lived a good life for us here. So, terrible suffering for the Japanese, and I do emphasise that, but you have to remember what else was going on, why they dropped the bomb. And I found out that there was a prisoner of war camp in Hiroshima, or very near, where the bomb was dropped. And the guy who was in that prisoner of war camp, he survived, and he told his story. He was actually going to be executed. He knew he was going to be executed in the following days. And it's a miracle more of them were not executed because the Japanese did not want them rescued in any way. Now, you might know this man because he became important in Tewkesbury after the war. And You know about Ravenscroft Plastics? Anybody work for them? Oh, what a shame. Oh, no? But, yeah, he had been a Japanese prisoner of war, survived, came back and started this business which I presume has now disappeared now, but in 1961 it was celebrated by the Tewkesbury Register. His son is still around. I tried to persuade him to write his father's biography, but I haven't succeeded yet. So if you know his son, please have a chat with him, tell him he's not forgotten. Right, now this is the famous Kohima Memorial. We know about it because every time we commemorate the war, we end. Now, are you going to come forward, Rod? Rod has organised the ceremony this morning. He'll also be organising Sunday's ceremony, and he would like to read about Kohima. I think you're going to ask Rod, if people are able to, would they like to stand up when you read the coup for a bit?
The very end of the part. This is a poem written a week ago. Forgotten Army. In August, we must remember the Forgotten Army. Those who fought and died in countries far away. Burma was the main front for fighting infantry, the Gloucesters, the Worcesters, Yorkshire Light Infantry, Duke of Wellingtons, North Staffs, Enniskillens too, the Chindits, Marauders, the Gurkhas, Indian and Burmese regiments, and many more besides, fighting while their comrades fell, dead by their sides. For those taken prisoner, nothing did fare well, working as slave labourers in the Burmese jungle hell. Many battles being fought in places far away. Kohima, Imphal, Myitsan, Hills 170, Mandalay, Raman, Chidusa, Barman, Yangon, Maktila, Irrawaddy. So on 15th of August, we remember gratefully a victory oft forgotten so countries could be free. V-Day must be remembered. Each and every year, a Kohima epitaph said loud for all to hear. Will you please stand?
If you're able to.
When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today.
We repeat, we will remember them. Thank you, Rob. Great. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for doing that. Very kind of you. Right. I don't just want to think about prisoners of war. We've got to remember the people who were on the winning side in the 14th Army. And there is the son of one of those soldiers. And that is our former town crier, Mike Keane-Price, who is at the back there. He's brought in his father's medals for you to see. Now, one thing about Mike was, like Mrs. Wagstaff, he never saw his father until you were age 5, is that right? Okay, because he wasn't a prisoner, he was fighting out in Burma, and he didn't get back. It was quite important in those days because you had 6 months to get back after the war, and they kept your job open for you. He just missed that deadline, and when he got back, his job in Gloucester was not kept open for him. Fortunately, one of his comrades made sure he got the job back in the end. So Mike spent the 5 years of his life not knowing who his father was, and of course it must have been traumatic because this bloke comes into your life, you don't know who on earth he is, he expects to be your father, and life is not that. I was born in November 1946, and my brother hoped his father was coming home he'd been away for 4 or 5 years, looking forward to his father coming back. And what did he get instead? He got presented with a baby brother, me, and he didn't like it, and very, very difficult. So Mike thank you for coming today. I'm sorry we haven't made your part, but you are part of the story. We're not going to forget this, okay? And do come and see in Coffee this wonderful display of all Mike's medals, his father's medals. Yes? Just a minute, I'll have to come. Derek, can you come and give him this? Just a minute, Mike, sorry. Your voice is very good still, but it's difficult here.
Anybody who knows Gloucester at all, I lived in Church Hill Road, on the junction with Central Road. And there was the pig bin, where all the food waste was put in. You've got little caddies now to do it. And that's where I was stood on that. I was lifted up, and I was the guest of honour. And they threw taxidermies, bears and things on the fire. The council appeared and said, do you realise the main sewer is below where your fire, and you'll be taking out the whole street soon, so the fire had to be moved. And all these lovely people were saying, don't worry, Michael, Daddy'll be home soon. Daddy'll be home soon. Right? 15th of August, 1945. In the early hours of 1947,
47.
My father came home.
So, and he was a soldier, but...
He wasn't a prisoner, he was
exactly. So, thank you for coming tonight and sharing that with us.
John, can I just tell you a little bit more to that?
Go on then.
Charles Hemming had 5 brothers.
Yeah.
They were all my uncles. The older one was George. He was in Australia and he was taken into the Australian Air Force, and he was in right at the top of Darwin, trying to stop the Japanese from attacking the North.
They were going to, yeah.
When the Japanese surrendered, he was given a job with a load of men. He was parachuted into the jungles to repatriate the English and American and soldiers were held by the Japanese.
Ah.
And he knew that his brother, Charles, was there somewhere, and he tried looking for him, but he never found him.
Yeah.
No. Now, he was 90 when he came back to England, and he told me all about it, and he was still having nightmares then of what he saw while he was in those jungles repatriating those.
So he wasn't even fighting, it was
no, he never fought.
That's right. Yeah.
But he was prepared to fight if they invaded Australia. But it didn't, so they gave him another job and he had to go in the jungle and out repatriate them.
Thank you for
and
telling us.
Never forget that.
Never forgot it.
By the way, VJ was not the end of the war. The 10th Battalion of the Gloucestershire Regiment were taking casualties in September 1945 because the Japanese
wouldn't
surrender. It was down to each battalion colonel, are you going to surrender? And they said, no, we'll die. So when the 10th Gloucesters went to take these fortresses and bastions and expecting the Japanese to come out, they were fired on. Ah. And so we were taking casualties. Men who've been told they're going home.
Yeah.
It's all over. The emperor's surrendered. And they'll do as they're told, the Japanese, because he's a god, their emperor.
No. Yeah, we all remember stories about, even in our lifetime, about Japanese soldiers who had been in the jungle for years after the war, and they only came out years later because of this fear of disobeying their emperor. By the way, I saw the emperor when I went to Japan. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and he came out and gave a speech. So my daughter-in-law has never seen him, so she was jealous. And listening to Mike and Ken, what stories you want to share with us, please email is the easiest way. go to our website, Tewkesbury Historical Society. I'm the president. Email me. I'd love to hear more about what we've learned tonight. Okay, there's a lot to learn which I don't know. So please contact me afterwards. So we're near the end now. Somebody said good. Right. Who are the Japanese? Well, these are the Japanese I didn't like in 2004. This was at the museum. It was like a youth group, and they were quite terrifying. They were so keen on military music and military activities. I didn't like that at all. And if you've been looking at the BBC News this last month, there's been the election in Japan in the last month, and the right wing has done very well in that election. Well, we don't know where it'll come to after this, but that's what went wrong in the 1930s. The right wing took over the government and infiltrated with all their militaristic ideas. So I didn't like them very much. I was uncomfortable. Most of the Japanese are lovely, and that horrible dog is my son's, and I detest that dog. But the kids loved it, and I've never met an unpleasant Japanese person. It's really worthwhile going there, and they treat us so well, as long as they're not too right-wing. So, History Society, lots of you given up your time tonight in the holidays to come and support tonight. Thank you very much to you. And Sarah Andrew, she's come back 20 years after I taught her, and she taught me about Charles Hemming, which is wonderful, and brought her mum tonight. Sadly, Cecil Ryland's close relative, Tom, who lived in Tewkesbury, he's now passed on, but Mike Keen-Price says, well, I'm a relative of Cecil Ryland, so that's wonderful to learn. Penny Dron, over there, in a naval uniform there. Oh, I've still got this wrong. It's FS Jane. Jane is the name, right? Dear. And I'd like to thank Rick tonight over up there. Give us a wave. Thank you, Rick, for doing it. He's supposedly recording it. Hope it works. I made a mistake in the middle. Peter, thank you very much for giving up your day as well, for coming. If you've been on our website, Andrew Stewart's put all this on the website. He's done a fantastic job. THS committee members, they're here tonight. Most of you are here tonight, which is really wonderful. Lucy's sitting here, which is great. There's Hannah there, and Hannah's daughter somewhere. She comes and helps with the refreshments, she's good. Anne will serve you refreshments as soon as I finish, and you can come and see the things that some of the relatives have brought. Okay? Oh yes, and I didn't know who the friend was tonight, it's Lottie. And all the refreshments are free, so please stay behind, talk, enjoy the refreshments. Yeah, what am I going to do about my grandson? Do I tell him what I know, or do I keep quiet? Difficult decision, isn't it? I bet he'll never ask me, which is a shame. Okay, so I do want to thank Sam Edel. He did this, all our posters are done by Sam Edel, absolutely wonderful. But I do want to, he is now the guide for the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, and each year he does a guide to the war cemetery in the Borough Council War Cemetery in Gloucester Road. And he's going to do it on the 13th of September. You can book online, it's very easy, it's free. And Sam is the big bloke with the white hair, and just next to him, that's our Hannah there. You never told me why you turned up, Hannah. I want to know why you turned up. So it's well worth going. So please join Sam on that night. Sorry, that morning. Gloucester Road Car Park. Yeah. And our next meeting in THS, a proper meeting, 28th of September. And it's the grandson of Alderman Frank Knight. Now, you all have heard of Alderman Knight, haven't you? The school. But I wonder how much you know about Alderman Knight. And it's quite a remarkable story he's researched. And so I do recommend that you come and see that. Frank Knight is the one on the left there. Looks a bit serious, doesn't he? And that's the family. Wonderful. So do come September the